From Night, a memoir by Elie Wiesel. The SS offered us a beautiful present this year. We had just returned from work. As soon as we had passed the camp's entrance, we sensed something out of the ordinary in the air. The roll call was shorter than usual. The evening soup was distributed with great speed, swallowed as quickly. We were anxious. I was no longer in the same block as my father. I had transferred to another commando, the construction one, where 12 hours a day I hauled heavy slabs of stone. The head of my block was a German Jew, small with piercing eyes. That evening he announced to us that henceforth no one was allowed to leave the block after evening soup. A terrible word began to circulate soon thereafter: selection. We knew what it meant. The SS would examine us. Whenever he found someone extremely frail, a muscle man was what we called those inmates, he would write their number down, good for the crematorium. After the soup, we gathered between the bunks. The veterans told us, "You're lucky to have been brought here so late. Today, this is a paradise compared to what the camp was 2 years ago. Back then, Buna was a veritable hell. No water, no blankets, less soup and bread. At night, we slept almost naked, and the temperature was 30 below. We were collecting corpses by the hundreds every day. We worked very hard. Today, this is a little paradise." The capos back then had orders to kill a certain number of prisoners every day, and every week selection, a merciless selection. And yes, you are lucky. "Enough! Be quiet," I begged them. "Tell your stories tomorrow or some other day." They burst out laughing. They were not veterans for nothing. "Are you scared?" We too were scared, and at that time, for good reason. The old men stayed in their corner, silent, motionless, hunted down creatures. Some were praying. One more hour, then we would know the verdict: death or reprieve. And my father, I first thought of him now. How would he pass selection? He had aged so much. Our Blocko Teste had not been outside a concentration camp since 1933. He had already been through all the slaughterhouses, all the factories of death. Around 9 o'clock, he came to stand in our midst. "Achong!" There was an instant silence. "Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." For the first time, his voice quivered. "In a few moments, selection will take place. You will have to undress completely. Then you will go, one by one, before the SS officers. I hope you will pass. But you must try to increase your chances. Before you go in the next room, try to move your limbs. Give yourself some color. Don't walk slowly. Run. Run as if you had the devil at your heels. Don't look at the SS. Run straight in front of you." He paused, then he added, "And most importantly, don't be afraid." That was the last piece of advice we would have loved to be able to follow. I undressed, leaving my clothes on the cot. Tonight there was no danger that they would be stolen. Tibby and Yasi had changed commandos at the same time I did. Came to urge me. "Let's stay together. It will make us stronger." Yasi was mumbling something. He probably was praying. I had never suspected Yasi was religious. In fact, I had always believed the opposite. Tibby was silent and very pale. All the block inmates stood naked between the rows of bunks. This must be how one stands for the Last Judgment. "They are coming." 3 SS officers surround the notorious Dr. Mengele, who the very same who received us in Birkenau. The block attestate attempted to smile. He asked us, "Ready?" Yes, we were ready. So were the SS doctors. Dr. Mengele was holding a list, our numbers. He nodded to the block attestate. "We can begin," as if this were a game. The first to go were the notables of the block, the Stubenateste, the capos, the foremen, all of whom were in perfect physical condition, of course. Then came the ordinary prisoners' turns. Dr. Mengele looked them over from head to toe. From time to time, he noted a number. I had but one thought, not to have my number taken down and not to show my left arm. In front of me, there were only Tibby and Yossi. They passed. I had time to notice Mengele had not written down their numbers. Someone pushed me. It was my turn. I ran without looking back. My head was spinning. You were too skinny. You were too weak. You were too skinny. You were good for the ovens. The race seemed endless. I felt as though I had been running for years. You were too skinny. You were too weak. At last I arrived, exhausted. When I caught my breath, I asked Yossi and Tibby, "Did they write me down?" "No," said Yossi, smiling. He added, "Anyway, they couldn't have. You were running too fast." I began to laugh. I was happy. I felt like kissing him. At that moment, the others didn't matter. They had not written me down. Those whose numbers had been noted were standing apart, abandoned by the whole world. They were silently weeping. The SS officers left. The block attestate appeared. His face reflected our collective weariness. "It all went well. Don't worry. Nothing will happen to anyone. Not anyone." He was still trying to smile. A poor, emaciated Jew questioned him anxiously, his voice trembling. "But sir, they did write me down." At that, the block attestate vented his anger. "What? Someone refused to take his word? What is it now? Perhaps you think I'm lying. I'm telling you once and for all, nothing will happen to you. Nothing. You just like to wallow in your despair, you fools." The bell rang, signaling that the selection had ended in the entire camp. With all my strength, I began to race back toward Block 36. Midway, I met my father. He came toward me. "So, did you pass?" "Yes." "And you?" "Also." We were able to breathe again. My father had a present for me, half a ration of bread bartered from someone he found at the depot, a piece of rubber that could be used to repair a shoe. The bell. It was already time to part, to go to bed. The bell regulated everything. It gave me orders and I executed them blindly. I hated that bell. Whenever I happened to dream of a better world, I imagined a universe without a bell. A few days passed. We were no longer thinking about the selection. We went to work as usual and loaded the heavy stones onto the freight cars. The rations had grown smaller. That was the only change. We had risen at dawn, as we did every day. We received our black coffee, our ration of bread. We were about to head to the workyard as always. The block attestate came running. "Let's have a moment of quiet. I have here a list of numbers. I shall read them to you. All of those called will not go to work this morning. They will stay in the camp." Softly, he read 10 numbers. We understood. These were the numbers from the selection. Dr. Mengele had not forgotten. The block attestate turned to go to his room. The 10 prisoners surrounded him, clinging to his clothes. "Save us, you promised." "We want to go to the depot. We are strong enough to work. We are good workers. We can. We want. He tried to calm them, to reassure them about their fate, to explain to them that they were staying in the camp didn't mean much, had no tragic significance. After all, I stay here every day. The argument was more than flimsy. He realized it, and without another word, he locked himself in his room. The bell had just rung. Form ranks. Now it no longer mattered that the work was hard. All that mattered was to be far from the block, far from the crucible of death, and from the center of hell. I saw my father running in my direction. Suddenly I was afraid. What was happening? He was out of breath, hardly able to open his mouth. Me too. Me too. They told me too to stay in the camp. They had recorded his number without his noticing. What are we going to do? I said anxiously. But it was he who tried to reassure me. It's not certain yet. There's still a chance. Today they will do another selection, a decisive one. I said nothing. I felt time was running out. He was speaking rapidly. He wanted to tell me so many things. His speech became confused. His voice was choked. He knew that I had to leave in a few moments. He was going to remain alone, so alone. Here, take my knife, he said. I won't need it anymore. You may find it useful. Also, take this spoon. Don't sell it. Quickly, go. Go ahead. Take what I'm giving you. My inheritance. Don't talk like that, Father. I was on the verge of breaking into sobs. I don't want you to say such things. Keep the spoon and the knife. You will need it as much as I. We will see each other tonight after work. He looked at me with his tired eyes, veiled by despair. He insisted, I am asking you. Take it. Do as I ask you, my son. Time is running out. Do as your father asks you. The capo shouted the order to march. The commando headed toward the camp gate. Left, right. I was biting my lips. My father had remained near the block, leaning against the wall. Then he began to run, to try to catch up with us. Perhaps he had forgotten to tell me something, but we were marching too fast. Left, right. We were at the gate. We were being counted. Around us, the din of military music. Then we were outside. All day I plodded around like a sleepwalker. Tibby and Yossi would call out to me from time to time, trying to reassure me, as did the capo, who had given me easier tasks that day. I felt sick at heart. How kindly they treated me, like an orphan, I thought. Even now, my father was helping me. I myself didn't know whether I wanted the day to go by quickly or not. I was afraid of finding myself alone that evening. How good it would be to die right here. At last, we began the return journey. I longed for an order to run. The military march, the gate, the camp. I ran toward Block 36, where there's still miracles on earth. Were there still miracles on earth? He is alive. He had passed the second selection. He had still proven his usefulness. I gave him back his spoon and knife.